Oiwa, a Japanese ghost story by KuroKoneko Kamen.
Tales from the Cryptkeeper.
In the cemetery of Yatsuya during winter, Oiwa poured water from a ladle onto the gravestones of her late son and father. The loss of both her son and father left her feeling incredibly isolated in the world. Oiwa softly spoke.
Father, I hope you're watching over my son. I couldn't shield him as a mother. I feel so forsaken in this world. I yearn for your presence. I'm at a loss, unsure of what steps to take.
Oiwa, despite still being married to Tamiya Eamon, found herself bereft of any affection for him due to his failure to support her when she needed him most, following the loss of her son. Eamon, a ronin or masterless samurai, was not a kind man. He resorted to theft and deceit to acquire wealth, and his only admirable traits were his good looks and his skill with a sword. Despite Eamon's additional vices of excessive drinking and gambling, Oiwa's father, too, had been a ronin and impoverished. In secret, Oiwa would venture to the red light district at night to supplement her family's income. The final straw for Oiwa came when Eamon recklessly spent the money she'd earned, intended for her newborn son's medicine, on his destructive drinking and gambling habits. Oiwa expressed her concern, saying,
I'm uncertain about my future with Eamon. Yet, he has sworn to avenge you, Father.
In the biting cold and snow, Oiwa felt a sense of loneliness creeping in. However, a sudden warmth enveloped her as someone draped a mino, a straw cape, around her shoulders. Assuming it was Eamon, she turned to greet him with a hint of hope, but instead she found herself face to face with her childhood friend, Kentaro. Oiwa's countenance lightened upon seeing her longtime friend Kentaro, a beacon of hope in her otherwise dismal situation. She had to tilt her head back to gaze into Kentaro's warm brown eyes. As a farmer, Kentaro was robust, resembling a sturdy horse. His brown hair was cropped short and a scar marred one side of his face. Despite his imposing appearance, Kentaro was kind-hearted, a true giant in gentleness. Kentaro's expression bore a touch of sorrow and sympathy.
Oiwa, I was saddened to learn about your son. I extend my deepest condolences.
Thank you, Kentaro. The winter has been particularly harsh on our village this season, affecting many, especially the children. A disease has been circulating, and unfortunately our son, Momotaro, contracted it. We were unable to afford the necessary medication, and thus...
She paused, biting her lower lip. A flash of anger crossed Kentaro's eyes, and he mused,
Could it be that Eamon squandered it all on drink and gambling once more?
Oiwa remained tellingly silent. Kentaro inquired sternly,
Why, Oiwa, do you continue to remain with Eamon, given that he was the cause of your son's demise? Why not seek a separation?
A mixture of anger and sadness swirled in Oiwa's blue gaze.
Eamon promised to find the culprit who murdered my father and seek vengeance on his behalf, given my inability to do so. Eamon, with his flaws yet exceptional swordsmanship, is the one who can fulfill this promise. He will avenge my father.
What if I found the bandit and killed him instead?
Kentaro questioned, giving Oiwa a searching look. Oiwa arched an eyebrow.
You can,
she observed, taking in his attire, a humble farmer's ensemble of a beige Haori wrap shirt, brown hakama pants, a wide-brimmed straw kasa hat, and traditional straw waraji sandals. His hands, marked with calluses, held his reliable pickaxe, a tool he seldom left behind.
You're not a samurai, Ken. You're a farmer. You're unfamiliar with the art of swordsmanship.
I could locate the bandit and eliminate him, thus releasing you from Eamon's grasp. You truly deserve a better life than what Eamon provides. The way he treats you is deplorable, Oiwa.
Kentaro urged. Oiwa felt a mix of flattery and sadness from Kentaro's words.
I'm not as pure as you might think, Kentaro,
she said, wrestling with the thought that perhaps Eamon was her rightful match. The idea of Kentaro discovering her secret, her clandestine visits to the pleasure district, filled her with dread. Would he view her with disgust and disdain? Oiwa attempted to divert the conversation.
Perhaps it's time for you, Kentaro, to consider marriage and starting a family. Are there any village girls who catch your eye?
She inquired playfully. Kentaro's complexion turned rosy, and he self-consciously scratched at his cheek.
I fear few women would find beauty in my scarred visage, and likely flee from me,
he admitted, his shoulders drooping in a disheartened posture. Oiwa gently traced the scar on Kentaro's face with her finger.
I wouldn't abandon you.
she said, her cheeks flushing.
I believe the scar adds an intriguing allure to your appearance.
Kentaro offered her a lopsided smile.
Perhaps there's one girl who catches my interest,
He said, his brown eyes twinkling.
Who might this girl be, I wonder?
Oiwa inquired, unaware of Kentaro's admiring gaze.
I suspect it's Oume. She's attractive, fashionable, well-off, and her father is a physician. She resides in the house adjacent to mine. She's my neighbor. She appears to be a kind soul. She occasionally drops by to offer me tea.
Kentaro wrinkled his nose.
Oume? She's overly preoccupied with her appearance and constantly wears excessive makeup, making it hard to recognize her. I find such artificial beauty unappealing. I much prefer the genuine charm of someone like you, who doesn't rely on makeup.
His eyes softened as they swept over Oiwa's long brown hair, striking blue eyes and delicate ivory-hued skin. Oiwa sighed longingly.
I wish I could afford an expensive face cream.
She pursed her lips in a pout.
Maybe you should ask your friend Oume for one?
Kentaro suggested.
Maybe I will.
Oiwa returned with a thoughtful hum. The friends shared a laugh, and all of a sudden, they didn't seem to feel the chill in the air as snowflakes gently settled on their noses. Meanwhile, at Ume's dwelling, Oume stood by her bedroom window, offering a clear vantage point of Oiwa's home and her husband Iemon, who was outside, axe in hand, chopping firewood despite the cold, snowy weather. His physique was evident as he worked, the muscles in his arms flexing. During the winter, Oume would observe Iemon as he chopped firewood outside their home, instead of practicing his swordsmanship. His martial arts routine, or kata, was replaced by this physical labor. Despite being a ronin, his sword skills remained sharp. Iemon's raven-black hair glistened under the snow's reflected light, and from her vantage point, Oume was too distant to appreciate the warm hue of Iemon's eyes, which appeared almost golden. Oume bit her thumbnail in frustration. Envy consumed her, as she coveted Iemon for herself.
Iemon, he should be mine, not Oiwa's. Though Oiwa may be more beautiful, I possess more wealth, yet he is captivated by her and her lovely visage. If only there were some means to remove Oiwa from the picture, so that I could wed Iemon. Then I could find true happiness.
Iemon observed Oume gazing at him, to which he returned a friendly smile and wave. Oume was taken aback, her cheeks flushed, and she hastily closed the shutters of her bedroom window. Her heart pounded within her breast, for only Iemon could elicit such a response. Determined, Oume resolved to approach her grandfather to discuss her predicament. Oume's grandfather, Dr. Gennai, was a herbalist who spent most of his time making medicines or ointments in his kusuriya. The apothecary was where Oume found her grandfather engrossed in his work, and she approached him.
Grandfather,
She pleaded in a whiny, petulant voice.
I need your assistance.
Dr. Gennai gazed curiously at his cherished granddaughter.
What's the matter, Oume? What's troubling you?
Grandfather, I find myself in a predicament.
Oume lamented, moving about the room in a flurry of red silk. Her red silk kimono complemented her dyed red hair.
I am in love with a ronin, but he does not return my affections.
She added, her voice filled with distress.
And who is this fool that fails to see the appeal of my adorable granddaughter?
Dr. Gennai inquired, his tone revealing his annoyance.
Iemon, our neighbor who lives next door to us.
Oume revealed. Dr. Gennai arched a bushy eyebrow at his capricious granddaughter.
Aren't you aware that he's married, Oume? I believe his wife is named Oiwa.
Oume expressed her disdain, waving her hands in the air.
I despise her, this Oiwa. She's of humble means, yet Iemon is smitten with her due to her striking beauty. If only there was some way to remove Oiwa from the picture, then I could marry Iemon.
Dr. Gennai showed a displeased expression.
Given my connections with the local lord, I could arrange for you to meet some suitable samurai, rather than Iemon.
Oume declared passionately.
I love Iemon, and if I cannot be with him, I shall take my own life through seppuku.
Dr. Gennai's face scrunched up in concern.
Calm yourself, Oume. If it's Iemon you wish to marry, I'll ensure it comes to pass.
Oume's eyes gleamed with relief, hope, and joy.
Thank you so much, grandfather. I appreciate your help.
Oume embraced her grandfather warmly. Dr. Gennai returned Oume's embrace and gently patted her fiery red hair.
I adore you, Oume. You mentioned that Iemon loves Oiwa's pretty face?
Oume shared secretively.
Iemon only appreciates Oiwa for her attractive appearance. She lacks charm in other aspects.
Dr. Gennai pondered, running his fingers over the assortment of medicinal jars lining his apothecary's shelves. While most of the contents were harmless, some held lethal potential.
I believe I've found a solution,
he said, his lips curling into a menacing smile. The next day, Oiwa was preparing dinner, anticipating Iemon's return from the gambling house, when an unexpected knock on the door jolted her. Who could it be at this hour? Could it be Kentaro? A smile tugged at the corners of Oiwa's lips at the thought. However, upon opening the door, she found it was her neighbor, Oume, standing there instead. Oume confidently stepped inside, as if the dwelling belonged to her.
Oiwa-chan, I've dropped by for a cup of tea with you.
Oume donned the latest winter attire, a kimono adorned with fur lining and a vibrant combination of red and gold. The kimono's red hue accentuated Ume's own fiery hair, causing Oiwa to feel slightly self-conscious about her own modest, simple blue kimono. Oiwa grew flustered.
Oh, you have? But I don't have...
Oume presented a basket.
My chef has prepared an excess of cookies, and I worry about consuming them all alone, fearing weight gain. I need your assistance in consuming some.
Oiwa's face brightened with relief. She didn't possess an abundance of treats for unexpected guests.
Naturally, I'll prepare some tea for you. Feel free to make yourself comfortable.
Before Oiwa could complete her statement, Oume gracefully knelt before the low wooden table in the living room. Oiwa prepared 2 cups of green tea, brought them into the living room, and placed them on the low wooden table.
Here's your tea, Oume-san.
Oume gently lifted the handkerchief concealing the cookies within the basket, revealing an array of delectable treats. Oiwa's eyes shone with delight at the sight of the cookies. They appeared exquisite, with some boasting a mix of nuts and fruits, while others were dusted with powdered sugar.
Wow, these cookies look fantastic.
Oiwa complimented. Oume gestured towards the basket with a broad smile.
Feel free to help yourself to some cookies.
Oiwa picked a cookie from the basket, took a bite, and let out a soft sigh.
This is delicious.
She praised. Oume took a sip of her tea, casting a disapproving gaze around the modest dwelling.
The room feels quite chilly.
She remarked, suggesting,
Perhaps you could add more firewood to the hearth.
Ah, yes, of course.
Oiwa said, standing to throw another small log into the stove that was in the center of the room.
Does she not realize how expensive firewood is, especially around this time of year?
Oiwa pondered.
I spotted Iemon chopping firewood earlier.
Oume began in a nonchalant tone.
He certainly works diligently, doesn't he?
Oiwa winced.
Ah, yes, indeed. Hiemon is also a drunk and a gambler, but it would be wrong of me to speak ill of my husband.
Oiwa mentally chided herself. Oume expressed a hint of envy, stating,
I must admit, I'm a bit jealous of you, Oiwa.
with a slight pout on her countenance.
Of me?
Oiwa exclaimed.
You're fortunate to have such a devoted husband. And indeed, with your captivating beauty, it's only natural.
Oume praised.
Oh no, you're far more attractive than I am, Oume.
Oiwa replied, waving her hand dismissively.
Which face cream do you prefer, Oiwa? I've experimented with numerous options, but they don't seem to yield significant results.
Oume lamented. Oiwa blushed out of shame.
I don't use face cream. It's too expensive.
Oume inquired.
What measures do you take for your skin during the winter months?
Oiwa remained silent.
My dear, that's not acceptable.
She exclaimed, reaching into her kimono sleeve.
I just so happen to have an extra face cream with me at present.
Oume placed a jar of face cream on the table and pushed it towards Oiwa.
Here, I'd like you to have it to help with your winter skin dryness. My grandfather, Dr. Gennai, crafted it using premium ingredients.
Oiwa's eyes widened in astonishment.
I'm truly sorry, but I couldn't possibly accept such an expensive present.
I'm quite insistent. In fact, I have several jars of this cream at my home.
Oume replied with a smile.
Well, if you're certain.
Oiwa agreed excitedly.
Thank you, Oume-san. You're too kind.
You're most welcome, Oiwa. You might feel slight tingling sensation, which is a sign that the cream is effectively working due to its medicinal properties. As the saying goes, beauty is pain. Now, I must take my leave as I have an appointment with the seamstress to alter one of my winter kimonos. Farewell.
Oume spoke in her characteristic light-hearted tone.
Sayonara.
Oiwa murmured as she observed Oume depart through the front door, closing it behind her. With eagerness, Oiwa grasped the jar of ointment. She unfastened the lid and inhaled its fragrance, finding it pleasingly floral. Without delay, Oiwa commenced to apply her newly acquired costly face cream. She began to gently pat it onto one side of her face and massaged it in. The cream had a burning, stinging sensation, as Oume had been forewarned due to its medicinal properties.
Ow. Beauty is pain.
Oiwa repeated. Determined to endure, she persisted in applying the cream to one side of her face, but the discomfort became unbearable, causing her to halt the application. Tomorrow, she planned to tackle the other side of her face with the cream. As Imon stormed into their humble abode, shaking off the remnants of the winter's chill from his broad shoulders, he bellowed,
Oiwa, I'm back. I've been out all day and I'm famished. I trust you've prepared dinner for me?
With a swift sweep of his arm, he settled himself cross-legged before the low wooden table.
Just a moment, my dear.
Oiwa called out, hurrying to complete the meal for her husband. Her face, half concealed behind her curtain of long brown hair, bore a crimson hue that Imon chose to overlook. Upon finding his meal before him, Imon, with a casual air, did not comment on the unusual coloration of Oiwa's visage. Instead, he dug into his meal with relish, oblivious to the growing mystery surrounding his wife's appearance. The next day dawned, and Imon was the first to stir on the futon that he shared with his wife. As he opened his eyes, he found himself gazing upon his wife's sleeping visage, which was normally a very pleasant experience for Imon. However, the sight that greeted him this time was far from pleasant. To prevent his scream from waking up Oiwa, Imon bit down onto his own hand. The beauty of Oiwa's face had been marred. The left half of her visage was now disfigured, scarred and grotesque. Her left eye hung oddly, drooping down in an unsettling manner. Imon ventured out of his home on the frosty morning, hastening towards the village's central well. He retrieved a bucket and filled it with water, taking a few swallows before dousing his face with the icy liquid, despite the cold. Pale and shivering, Imon quivered like a trembling leaf, unable to erase the image of his wife's grotesque visage from his thoughts.
Good morning, Ohio, Yemon-san. Are you well? You appear quite distressed, as if you've encountered a ghost,
said a male voice from behind him. Imon turned to find Dr. Gennai standing there. The elderly man was clad in a thick haori coat and black hakama trousers, his white hair pulled back into a top knot.
Good day, Dr. Gennai. It's a nightmare. My wife fell ill, and now her appearance has changed in the most unsettling manner. Might you have some medicine that could help her, Doctor?
I'm truly sorry to hear about your wife's condition. I'll do my best to assist you.
Dr. Gennai expressed sympathetically, but his countenance soon turned somber.
I'm afraid I've heard of this illness before. I'm afraid your wife's prognosis isn't good, and she may not live much longer. As for you, you're a young, capable man, still in the prime of your life. You deserve a beautiful, young wife. Perhaps you should consider my granddaughter, who seems to have taken a liking to you.
A sly smile played at the corners of the doctor's lips. A look of surprise momentarily graced Imon's somber face.
I hadn't realized,
he said. Imon would never admit that he sometimes would practice his swordsmanship outside of his house in order to have a nice view of Oume's bedroom window. If Imon were lucky, he'd catch a glimpse of Oume dressing. In a similar fashion, Oume would watch Imon as he went through his kata.
In the unfortunate event of your current wife's demise, I would support Oume marrying you. Furthermore, I could arrange for you to serve under a lord, transforming your status from Ronin to samurai,
Gennai suggested.
I am honored by the offer. We'll have to wait and see what becomes of my wife's health first, of course.
Imon hedged nervously.
Indeed,
Gennai agreed, offering a smile.
Fate will decide the outcome.
Investigating the death of Oiwa's father, Kentaro found no one with helpful information about the murder. According to eyewitness testimonies offered by some of the villagers, the last sighting of Oiwa's father was with Iemon, and they had a disagreement before parting ways. Kentaro found Iemon's behavior suspicious and decided to keep an eye on him. It wasn't long before he noticed something amiss, as Iemon left his residence around an hour after sunset, dressed entirely in black and wearing a straw hat to conceal his face, slipping stealthily into the darkness. Kentaro trailed Iemon to a disreputable sector of the village, where the gambling dens, opium dens, and houses of ill repute were nestled amidst the shadows. The air was thick with the scent of vice, and the atmosphere was charged with an undercurrent of danger. Iemon, seemingly at ease, strode confidently into a particularly seedy gambling den, teeming with thieves and ruffians. He took a seat towards the back of the establishment, ordering himself a flask of sake without hesitation. Kentaro, maintaining a discreet distance, found a spot in the shadows to observe Iemon. It was peculiar that Iemon showed no interest in the gambling activities that were unfolding before him, instead appearing to be on the lookout for someone. The hours ticked by, and the tension in the air grew palpable as Iemon's patience wore thin. Finally, a man clad all in black and a hooded cloak entered the den, his presence causing a ripple of unease among the patrons. Iemon's eyes lit up, and he offered the mysterious figure a small wave. The man strolled over and took a seat directly next to Iemon. When Kentaro got a peek of what lay beneath the man's hood, the farmer was surprised to note the man was wearing a fox mask. This could only mean one thing. The man was a ninja assassin. The man, his voice low and gravelly, addressed Iemon.
It seems we've not crossed paths in a while. I've heard whispers that you've been in this den.
Iemon smiled.
Takwetsu, just the man I was looking for.
Oh, and might I remind you to be mindful of your words, as I've warned you about revealing my identity to others.
The assassin chided.
Don't be so cold, old friend. My circumstances are about to change for the better. It's mutually advantageous for us. I have another task for you. I need you to stage a robbery at my residence and kill my sickly wife.
Iemon murmured, requiring Kentaro to lean in closely to catch their conversation. Astonishment flashed in the man's eyes, hidden behind his mask.
You speak of Oiwa, yet I believed you held affection for her.
Indeed, I did feel affection for her when she was well. However, her illness has transformed her appearance into something unbearable. Her disfigured visage is a constant reminder of my misery. Oiwa is the only obstacle preventing me from marrying Dr. Gennai's granddaughter, Oume.
Iemon whispered. The assassin commented.
You lucky dog. She's a little flashy for my taste, but I can understand the appeal with how rich she is. As for my compensation, I'll be expecting my standard payment.
Certainly, I appreciate your confidentiality. I'll stay put to strengthen my alibi and depart home by tomorrow's morn.
Iemon said.
Understood.
Takwetsu said before disappearing into the shadows. Kentaro stared in disbelief as the ninja seemed to vanish into thin air. Despite his disbelief, he had heard the conversation. He hastily exited the gambling den, searching for any trace of the assassin. Spotting him, Kentaro watched as the ninja nimbly leaped from one sloped tiled roof to another, disappearing in the direction of Oiwa's residence.
Oh no! Shit!
Kentaro swore mentally. Kentaro sprinted after the assassin, following his path until he finally hopped down from one of the roofs in order to continue his way to Oiwa's residence on foot. In a flurry, Kentaro scanned his surroundings, locating a pickaxe, and stealthily approached the ninja. As he drew near, he swung the pickaxe with the intention of decapitating the assassin. The assassin, swiftly evading the strike, relied on his honed battle reflexes. He spun around, retrieving a kunai dagger from his belt, which he brandished before him.
Who in the world are you, and what is your intention?
Takwetsu snarled.
I'm someone who cares for Oiwa very much.
Kentaro said simply. The ninja chuckled, his eyes glowing with an eerie gold light behind his mask.
It seems we are adversaries, for I am the cause of Oiwa's misery. Indeed, it was I who took her father's life.
You killed Oiwa's father? But why?
Kentaro demanded, his brow furrowing in confusion. Takwetsu admitted.
Iemon employed me to assassinate Oiwa's father because Oiwa wished to divorce him. Her father supported this decision, and so was simply in Iemon's way. Ironic, isn't it, that after all that trouble so that they could remain together, Iemon now wants me to kill Oiwa.
He let out a chilling laugh. Kentaro bristled with anger due to the blaze way the ninja was speaking about someone's death.
I won't let you kill Oiwa. Why don't you just walk away? Neither of us has to die tonight.
As a hired killer, I'm tasked with taking lives. It's merely a job to me, devoid of personal feelings. Iemon has offered a substantial reward for Oiwa's death, and I intend to carry out the deed.
Takwetsu clarified nonchalantly.
It seems we've come to blows then.
Kentaro declared, brandishing his pickaxe.
Bring it on, farmer.
Takuetsu taunted. With a swift charge, Kentaro and the ninja engaged in battle, their weapons colliding with a sparking clash. The air was filled with the rhythmic thud of their clash, each blow echoing through the night. However, Kentaro's immense strength proved too much for Takuetsu, and with a final decisive strike, the ninja fell, defeated. As Kentaro stood over his fallen foe, he felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that he had protected Oiwa, but sorrow for the life he had taken. The battle was over, but the consequences of his actions would linger.
I underestimated you, farmer.
Takuetsu gasped out before he died. Upon the ninja's demise, his lifeless body thudded heavily on the porch, causing Oiwa, ensconced in the living room, to quiver with apprehension.
Who's there?
She inquired from within her dwelling.
It's me, Oiwa. Open the door.
Kentaro called out. Oiwa opened the door, her smile fading as her eyes fell upon Kentaro and the lifeless body beside him. Her eyes widened and she gasped.
What transpired here?
Help me get him inside.
Kentaro said, and Oiwa could only nod stiffly in response. They brought the ninja's lifeless body into the house and dragged it across the floor, leaving a path of blood in their wake.
Who is this individual? A burglar, perhaps? What was his purpose here?
Oiwa inquired, wrapping her arms around herself. Kentaro turned to face Oiwa, his eyes scanning her face, taking note of her burns. A look of sadness crossed his features as he said,
Oiwa, please prepare some tea. I think you ought to sit down before I tell you what happened.
Oiwa agreed and prepared 2 cups of tea. She carried them back into the living room, placing them on the low wooden table, and took her place on the tatami floor, kneeling down next to Kentaro.
This man was an assassin sent by Emon to take your life.
Kentaro began gravely. Oiwa immediately grew confused by such an outlandish suggestion.
Kill me? Why would Ieamon want to kill me?
Dr. Gennai has offered Emon his granddaughter Oume's hand in marriage, along with a financial reward and a position in the Lord's service. This means he'd be a samurai again.
Kentaro explained, gripping the cup of tea in his hands so tightly that it began to crack. Oiwa protested.
But Oume is my friend. She wouldn't. I can't believe it.
Kentaro's face turned serious.
There's something else I need to tell you, but before I do, I want you to understand something, and that's that I have always loved you, and I still do.
Oiwa let out a shocked gasp.
You love me, Kentaro?
Kentaro confessed passionately.
I've loved you since we were children, and I intended to propose one day. However, I wanted to establish my rice farm first. Unfortunately, Emon proposed to you before I could, and I watched as he mistreated you, a regret I've carried ever since. I never found the courage to express my feelings. I don't care about your appearance or how you look now. My feelings for you remain unchanged.
My appearance? What are you talking about, Kentaro?
Oiwa asked with a tremor in her voice. Kentaro produced a compact mirror, revealing Oiwa's reflection. Upon seeing her disfigured face marred by burns and her ruined eye, Oiwa let out a blood-curdling scream and recoiled in abject terror.
No, my face! What happened to it? It's disfigured. The cream. The one Oume gave me. It must have been poisoned.
Oiwa exclaimed in horror.
Face cream?
Kentaro remarked, his voice laced with worry.
I must speak with Oume at once.
Oiwa said, pacing across the tatami mat.
I have to uncover the truth about this situation. It's hard to accept, but I can't help but suspect her involvement.
Kentaro expressed concern about Oiwa's plans.
Oiwa, flee with me instead.
He urged earnestly.
Forget about those cruel people.
Oiwa, disregarding Kentaro's concerns, decided to conceal her disfigured face with her hair. She reached for a comb, sat down, and started to meticulously brush her long, luxurious, and glossy hair over her face. However, as she did so, clumps of hair started to fall out, turning the floor beneath her a gruesome shade of red. Oiwa cried out in distress.
My hair! This is a monstrous act that has been committed against me. Oume will suffer the consequences.
She threw her comb against the wall in a fit of rage. Oiwa stood up abruptly, her eyes darting around the room frantically. Her eyes settled on Kentaro's pickaxe. She rushed towards it, grabbed it, and started towards the door. Oiwa's sudden movement caught Kentaro off guard, prompting him to swiftly rise.
Oiwa, hold on a moment. Stay here. Don't act impulsively.
He pleaded. He extended his hand, intending to grasp her arm.
Release me, Ken-kun. I must leave.
Oiwa pushed Kentaro aside, but as she turned to depart, she lost her balance and stumbled. In her fall, she landed upon the pickaxe, piercing her heart instantly.
Oiwa,
Kentaro exclaimed in shock at the unfortunate incident. Hurrying to her side, he gathered Oiwa in his arms, holding her close to his chest.
Oiwa, stay with me.
Ken, I was unable to avenge my father. I still don't know who killed him.
Oiwa moaned as blood dripped down her chin.
It was Emon.
Kentaro disclosed sternly.
He murdered your father to keep you from leaving him.
A shadow fell across Oiwa's face as a profound sense of horror welled up inside of her.
I'm married to the man who murdered my father?
She whispered, desperation evident in her voice.
Ken, seek justice for my father. Seek justice for me. Avenge us.
I will. I promise you, Oiwa.
Ken said as the light seemed to fade from her blue eyes.
Oiwa.
He felt tears well up in his eyes, and he held her lifeless body tighter against him.
I regret not being able to safeguard you, but I will ensure justice is served. I will do whatever it takes, even if it means sacrificing my own life.
The day of Iemon's wedding to Oume was a radiant spring day, adorned with blossoming cherry trees. The ceremony seemed to progress smoothly until, just moments before, the Shinto priest unexpectedly summoned Iemon for a private conversation. Iemon found himself questioning his decision to engage the unconventional Shinto priest for his wedding ceremony. The priest's appearance was far from the norm, with his short black hair and pierced ears. His eyes, an uncommon shade of blue, eerily resembled Oiwa's. He donned the traditional attire of a Shinto priest, including a white hakui shirt and light blue hakama pants. The eccentric Shinto priest, who was strikingly attractive, posed a concern for Iemon. He was accustomed to being the most handsome man in his surroundings, and the thought of Oume finding Renito more appealing was unsettling. However, since he had already paid for the priest's services, Iemon felt compelled to tolerate his presence, at least for the time being. Ren initiated the conversation, saying,
I was just curious if you truly intend to proceed with this plan.
His eyes sparkling with amusement. Iemon's face showed a puzzled expression.
What do you mean? Are you asking about my intention to marry Oume? Absolutely, I am planning to marry her.
Ren let out a thoughtful hum.
I don't think your wife will be too pleased about that.
Wife? I don't have a wife.
Iemon snapped.
Who is Oiwa then?
Ren asked in a cheeky manner. Iemon appeared taken aback.
How on earth do you know about that? Oiwa is deceased. Her friend Kentaro, in a moment of rage, took her life, possibly due to her rejection or some other reason.
He seemed unbothered as he added,
What's the relevance?
Ren pondered thoughtfully, running his fingers over his chin.
It's unfortunate to hear that her childhood friend was the one who took Oiwa's life. Quite a tragedy indeed. If you believe Oiwa wouldn't object to your remarriage, then by all means, go ahead and marry Oume. However, if there's any lingering doubt, I'd advise postponing the wedding for your own well-being. As the saying goes, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned.
I've never heard that expression.
Iemon grumbled.
Oh, people in the future use it a lot.
Ren said, offhandedly.
Enough nonsense. I paid you to do a service. You will marry Oume and I, Ito-san.
Iemon snarled. Ren acknowledged.
I'll do as you ask.
However, despite his compliance, the priest seemed to harbor a mysterious amusement. Renito officiated the wedding between Iemon and Oume at a beautiful Shinto shrine, marked by a towering red torii gate. During the ceremony, Iemon and Oume stood before the main shrine, but Iemon's enjoyment was marred by the priest's constant, enigmatic smirk. The priest's gaze frequently lingered on Iemon's shoulders, as if he suspected something was there. Iemon attributed his unease during the ceremony to nerves, but in hindsight, he couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. Iemon chose to focus his attention on his radiant spouse, disregarding the Shinto priest. He drew Oume into his embrace and shared a passionate kiss with her. In the middle of the night, Iemon awoke and turned to face his new wife, gazing upon her visage. In the soft glow of the moonlight filtering through the window, Iemon's eyes fell upon a face that was not his wife's. Instead, he beheld the grotesque visage of Oiwa, scarred and frightening. A scream of terror escaped him, and he hastily fled the bed. Awakened from slumber, Oiwa inquired,
What's the matter, my dear?
She sat upright in bed, her brow furrowed in puzzlement, addressing her husband, Emon.
My dear, you've transformed. A horrifying sight you've become. Your eyes, they've turned a sickly yellow and emit an unnatural glow,
Emon exclaimed in terror. Oiwa emerged from the bed, her countenance displaying worry.
What's the meaning of this, Emon? Was it a dream that disturbed you so?
Emon grabbed his sword, pulled it out of its sheath, and held it menacingly.
Keep your distance.
Oiwa moved closer to her husband, extending her hand towards him in a pleading gesture.
Dear, what's wrong?
Emon commanded, "Maintain your distance." In a state of terror, he swung his sword through the air, severing Oiwa's head. Oiwa's head toppled off her shoulders and rolled across the floor towards Emon. However, when it came to a stop in front of Emon and he looked into the head's lifeless eyes, he recognized the face as being Oume's and no longer Oiwa's. The false appearance had faded like a mirage in the desert. Emon had inadvertently beheaded his wife, a horrifying act he vehemently denied.
No, this isn't real. It's a dreadful dream.
Emon rushed out of the bedroom, hurrying through the house, and was on the verge of exiting through the front door when a voice echoed behind him.
Emon, are you okay?
Emon turned once more to find Oiwa advancing towards him. Upon closer inspection, Emon understood the situation. Oiwa had returned as a vengeful ghost, an Onryu seeking retribution.
Keep your distance, Oiwa.
Emon cried out in panic.
Oh dear, you appear distressed. I could perhaps concoct a soothing remedy for you to aid in rest.
Oiwa moved towards him with a worried countenance. Emon exclaimed,
Keep your distance,
and swung his gleaming katana through the air menacingly. Emon severed the head from the body, only to realize in horror that it was not Oiwa, but his father-in-law, Dr. Gennai, who lay before him, headless. Emon had inadvertently taken the life of his own father-in-law.
No, this can't be happening to me. I must be losing my mind,
he exclaimed. Emon's heart pounded like a war drum as he staggered out of the house, the laughter of the dead echoing in his ears. His wife, his father-in-law, they had worn Oiwa's face. Her twisted, scarred visage still burned in his mind, the empty socket where her eye once was, the drooping flesh of her cheek. He gasped for air as he stumbled through the deserted village street, which headed towards the mountains where he intended to seek refuge, his legs moving on instinct alone. Paper lanterns lined the path, swaying gently in the breeze. They should have been a comfort, a soft glow against the darkening sky, but each flickering flame revealed a new horror. As he passed the first lantern, he froze. There, in the gentle light, Oiwa's face stared back at him, her single eye gleaming with malice, her lips twisted into a crooked smile.
No, no,
Emon whispered, staggering backward, but every lantern he passed was the same. Oiwa's face, grotesque and scarred, reflected in each glowing orb. The paper rustled like whispered threats, her silent screams stretching out across the night. Her face, her hideous face, was everywhere. With a choked cry, Emon bolted up the street, but the lanterns followed, swaying, mocking him with their infernal glow. No matter how fast he ran, Oiwa's visage stared out from every light. Her presence surrounded him, inescapable, suffocating. He ran until his legs burned, his breath ragged, until the mountain loomed darkly ahead. In the distance, the shape of a bridge emerged through the mist. But even in his desperation, he felt the weight of Oiwa's vengeance tightening around him, knowing he could never truly escape her. He started to run across the bridge, thinking he'd finally been able to escape Oiwa, when her face yet again appeared through the mist. Enraged, Emon charged towards her, brandishing his sword. This time he was certain it was the genuine Oiwa.
Oiwa, this time I will slay you,
Emon declared, his eyes filled with madness.
Oiwa?
A voice questioned in return. Ever since being accused of murdering Oiwa, Kentaro had been a fugitive, with wanted posters bearing his image and name scattered throughout the village. He had taken refuge under a bridge on the outskirts, and it was there that he heard Emon approaching, shouting about vengeful spirits and Oiwa.
Oiwa?
He murmured to himself, startled by the mention of her name. Kentaro cautiously peered over the bridge's edge and saw Emon conversing alone. Indeed, it was Emon. He had arrived.
The heavens have led him here to me. I'll have the chance to avenge Oiwa and her father.
This thought filled Kentaro's mind. Kentaro climbed onto the bridge, gripping his pickaxe tightly. He aimed it at Emon.
For Oiwa, this time, I will be the one to strike you down.
Kentaro declared, brandishing his pickaxe at Imon, who pointed his katana in return.
Oiwa, this time I will slay you.
Imon challenged.
Oiwa?
Kentaro echoed Imon's statement, doubtful that the man recognized him. Could it be that the atrocities he'd committed against Oiwa had driven him to madness? Yet, Kentaro found no pity for Imon within himself. Imon, with a ferocious roar, lunged at Kentaro, his katana slashing through the air with deadly intent. Kentaro, determined to protect Oiwa's memory, defended himself valiantly with his pickaxe, the clash of steel against stone echoing ominously. The two engaged in a fierce battle, the air thick with tension and the scent of blood. Throughout the fight, Imon repeatedly called out the name Oiwa, his voice filled with a twisted obsession that sent a chill down Kentaro's spine. Kentaro, with a surge of strength, managed to push Imon's sword away with his pickaxe, the force of the impact sending sparks flying. Seizing the opportunity, he delivered a swift and decisive blow to Imon's head, the sound of its skull cracking under the impact echoing ominously. Blood splattered from Kentaro's weapon, painting the bridge a gory red, and Imon's body slumped to the ground, lifeless. Kentaro stood over the body of his enemy, his heart pounding in his chest. He had avenged Oiwa, but at what cost? The weight of his actions settled heavily on his shoulders, and he couldn't help but wonder if he had become as ruthless as the man he had just slain. Yet, he knew that he had no choice. Imon had taken everything from Oiwa, and now he had taken Imon's life. As he turned to leave, he vowed to continue his quest for justice, to ensure that Oiwa's memory would never be forgotten.
The deed is completely. I have avenged my beloved Oiwa and her father,
he whispered to himself. A set of footsteps echoed, causing Kentaro to spin around. A Shinto priest was advancing across the bridge towards him, his gaze fixed intently on Kentaro. Kentaro's brow furrowed at the priest's unusual appearance, with his short hair and ear piercings.
Good evening.
The priest began.
You must be Kentaro. I've heard a lot about you from a mutual acquaintance of ours. My name is Reni To. I am a traveling Shinto priest and exorcist.
A smile played upon his lips as he looked down at the lifeless form before him. Kentaro inquired,
Are you here to report me?
Ren arched an eyebrow and slightly tilted his head.
What crime are you implying? This man received his due punishment. As for Oiwa, I am aware that you did not murder her. Justice has been served here.
How could you know that?
Kentaro asked suspiciously. Ren shrugged.
Oiwa told me.
She told you, but how, when she's...
Kentaro stammered, showing his obvious confusion.
Earlier today, I officiated the marriage of Imon and Oume. Unbeknownst to them, Oiwa was present at the ceremony, appearing as a ghostly figure on Imon's shoulders, weeping blood. Tonight, Imon killed his new wife and father-in-law, believing them to be Oiwa, as he saw you wearing her likeness. Oiwa asked me to convey to you her deep affection for you.
Tears welled up in Kentaro's eyes.
I couldn't protect her. Oh, Oiwa, you were stronger than me, even in death. Yet I believe that one day, Oiwa and I will be together again.
Kentaro spoke with fervor.
That day may come sooner than you think.
Ren remarked, a hint of amusement in his tone.
It seems my expertise in an exorcist isn't required in this situation. Rest assured, Oiwa will never leave your side. Good night, Kentaro.
Kentaro continued to observe Ren's departure, his brow furrowed in puzzlement. The priest's words echoed in his mind.
Oiwa will never leave your side.
Was he referring to the eternal bond of love that Kentaro held in his heart, or the cherished memories he carried of Oiwa? The enigma of the priest's statement left Kentaro perplexed. After all, he was not one to delve into profound contemplations, being a humble farmer by trade. With a heavy heart, Kentaro began his journey towards the rising sun, guided by the mountains. As he walked, the ethereal figure of Oiwa glided alongside him, her smile radiant, yet her presence lingered, unresolved, as it was her unfinished business to remain by his side.
Tales from the Cryptkeeper.
Driven by grief and rage after being poisoned and disfigured by Oume and betrayed and abandoned by her husband Imon, Oiwa's spirit remained, seeking justice even in death. Oiwa haunted Imon, driving him to madness and ultimately leading to his demise at the hands of her childhood friend and admirer, Kentaro, who vowed to ensure that justice was served. Oiwa's story is a cautionary tale, reminding us that the scars we leave on others run deep, But it also speaks to the enduring power of love and loyalty.